left. Let's do it.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone to the legalhackathon.org MIT virtual venue. We're excited to be having an open notice and a clear button discussion today about a collaboration for a summer project and a hackathon series leading up to our July 12th and 13th hackathon in Berlin, California, Tel Aviv. Right now, we're going to discuss briefly open notice and the consent receipt, along with clear button in line with collaborating on what we've been calling an open notice registry, which will solve some massively big problems in data control. And with us right now, we have Daza Greenwood, Jonathan Askin, and John Wunderlich. We're expecting more people to drop in. And
hello, thanks very much, Mark. It's great to be here. We're just we're holding it down here in the Media Lab, but I think it's safe to say that at least for now, it's not the MIT online legal hackathon. In fact, it's like the London online legal hackathon, and we hereby we do a transition of leadership for the purposes of this session, and in anticipation of a big baton handoff for your July hackathons. But for the time being, you have command, sir.
That's great. Well, why don't you guys go ahead? I know that we're really excited to hear about the Clear Button project and what's going on in there. And so if you guys would like to introduce yourselves a bit more, that would be terrific.
Oh, okay. Do you want to just do an intro of who you are, and then I'll
and I haven't been involved in the Clear Button project, but I'm Jonathan Askin. I'm a professor at Brooklyn Law School. We've been running legal hackathons for a couple of years. I teach tech and telecom law, and absolutely thrilled to see folks at MIT and folks in London taking up the mantle to revolutionize legal tech. So I want to hand it back to you guys to talk the substance of Clear Button and open notice.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. So Jonathan is responsible, at least in my world, for opening this concept of a legal hackathon up as something that exists and that can give rise to work on projects like Clear Button. So I'm sorry, I am Daza Greenwood, scientist here at the Media Lab, and heading up this new legal physics research group. And we went down to New York in February, which is where we had the first great opportunity to work with you, Mark, and then with Mary Hodder as well in San Francisco. And our project from the Media Lab was this Clear Button project that we intended to work on. We got a little sidetracked on a very cool project that Judge Aiken had recommended on access to justice, but this is the project that really is core to Sandy Pentland's big data analytics and what we call the New Deal on data. Basically, the importance of having true personal control, meaningful capability for personal data to be not completely disintermediated from the person about whom it is. And so there's a number of techniques for that, and we're exploring, I think, the most promising ones here with your open notice and consent receipt approach, and then our very similar but slightly different capabilities, Clear Button. So with that said, what is Clear Button? So Mark, could I enlist you a little bit, please, to on your computer pull up clearbutton.net in the background, and I may ask you to screen share at some point, and then let people have a look at the picture or something. But narratively, the essential initial problem, the a priori problem, shall we say, with personal data control in a big data world is how do we even know where our data is? How do we know who has what data about us? We really don't know that. Hi, John. Yep. And so, I mean, the remedies and the rights and the presumptions in fair information practices, for example, European privacy law, even in HIPAA to some extent. Look, for example, that you have a right to request and get access to your personal data, to request corrections and so forth. Well, it's all but meaningless if, like, who do you ask? How do you ask? And my data is spread across probably thousands of companies and databases that I'm completely unaware of once it gets in the flow and the slipstream, globally. So the Clear button aims to create an initial basis by which some of the fair information practices and then other mechanisms and methods for the exercise of rights and obligations to personal data by which it can occur. What it is it solves the problem of providing notice to a person. Period. Basically, that's really what it's designed to do. But the context here is notice to a person related to their personal data. So if they're entitled to a notice, like a HIPAA notice, for example, or some other notice because you have their personal data, this would be very handy for that, and it could take the paper out. But more to the point, if people wanted to comply better with, say, the e-privacy directive, or with the Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights here in the United States, or with just the general tenets of this new deal on data, where people have meaningful control of their personal data, they need some way to interact with and to be on notice from, initially at least, people that have their data. So Clear Button's a registry. And the way it works is, thank you for showing that, Mark, is it shows in the beginning, the person says, more or less, I would like to be put on notice about who has my data. So that's essential, because if you read the European Privacy Directive, I know Mark's pored over it, many of us have, but there's a really critical little bit in there that I want to highlight, which is there's a trigger event prior to the rights being, some of the rights being right to be exercised. And it's that you have to ask, you have the right to ask for your data and get it. You have to ask before someone not giving it to you is actionable, you see? You actually have to do that. And so how do you ask? How is it noted when you asked? Well, this does that. And more to the point, so that's a legal reality. There's a trigger event that's necessary, that we don't have a good, you don't send a letter, please. Let's not talk about paper anymore in this context. And so another thing is there's a technical dimension, which is very important. Yesterday we heard from Justin Richer of MITRE Corporation talking about OpenID Connect and the MITRE open source implementation of it, and now the MIT implementation of that as well. So we have we've got OpenID running as a service now for faculty and staff and students here. What we like about this method is that it gives an easy way for people to join a registry and to have a discoverable endpoint when a notice is due to them, without having to, in advance, go to every storefront and track everybody down to say, give me notice. Like, that's an unsolvable problem. By contrast, if you had a OpenID Connect compliant, maybe more like Blue Button Plus in some ways, which is a healthcare records extension of OpenID Connect, but basically a registry. Now what you have is the capability of any company or government agency or other entity that has notice to give. They can check the registry. All they have to do is one thing. Published interface, some protocol that allows a matching algorithm, not hard, and see, does the person to whom I owe notice exist in the registry? It's a yes or no. If it's a yes, then you can route something to them. Anyone that creates an account in the registry, and I'm sorry, the other thing on the legal, on the mechanistic level, is there's a method and a mechanism that the scientists here actually added this concept, which is we need a model like a do not call registry. That was very important because with a do not call registry, what happens is there's this first action. The consumer says they sign up at a registry, and what it means is they are now on the legal list, that don't call me list. And now there could be big problems if people call them once they've taken that action and opted in. Same. And all of the telemarketers only need to do one thing, and they certainly bitched and moaned about how they can't do almost anything, but nothing too hard because it's impracticable. Well, in that very contentious climate, it was finally agreed, and it's now the law, that you can, in fact, do one thing. Just check the registry, okay? And don't call those people. That took years, actually, right? And so, but it's been proven that this design pattern can work even in difficulty of hostile political environments, because it's not that onerous to do one thing. Check a registry online, and we can do it way better now with Web 2.0, sort of like REST interface oriented methods than they had available for the rather clunky design of the kind of bulk oriented do not call registry. And so that's the basic concept, and the idea is that if there were a registry like this, then sort of like the blue button capability, which has been, I think, really well received as being effective for what it does, it could be as though there was a button on every website everywhere, even the ones you didn't know to go to, and that you could hit one button, not a blue button or not a green button for utility and environmental related stuff, and not any other color button, but sort of we called it clear button, because it indicates like this is the quintessential one. Like there's something that relates to that person who can trigger an event that says, hey, if there's any buttons by which I can get my data, I hereby am deemed to have clicked them, and like I'm not going to go through the ceremony of clicking them physically at one web page at a time. Doesn't even make sense with services. And then there can be a matching cron job at night. And then Sandy Pentland indicated, don't send the data to people that requested it. Just send them a link. So if I'm, I don't know, Walmart or someone like that, and I've got transactional data, and someone's asked for a copy of it, be very easy, actually. I might, in fact, like to be able to give a link to that person in a registry that they have asked to be served notice at, and let them click that link if they want to come and see the data I have. If they click the link and we associate their identity with the clear button identity, that and again, if it's comprised as a OpenID Connect compliant service interface, then you can log in with that actually. And there's technical questions as to whether that's the best way. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but just consider that what this feature set allows is we can now identify the person who you owe the notice to is the same as the person who's coming and clicking a link and asking for something, even if it's another identity bound to it. And the smart people are debating that kind of thing right now, and I know I don't know, but I do know this. It's stupid to give personal data to someone you're not really sure if it's that person. That's actually is unreasonable to ask companies or others to do. This exactly solves that. Exactly solves that. And then, so that's the essence of the architecture of it. I'll leave you just with 3 quick thoughts. One of them is, in addition to regulatory compliance or notice is like, I don't know, I didn't wake up this morning and say, gee, I really want to get some notices today, or give some notices. That would be a good, valuable day for me. It's important, but the real value here isn't just that. It's connection. Like, how about some connection around here in the network? Where we can have endpoints that are stable by which we can communicate with one another. There's a lot of reasons why I may want a lot of vendors that have my data to also, maybe I'll give them permission to tell me other things too, or when they're making changes in their policies, or things that don't require legal notice, but a lot of communications I want to have, and they want to have with me. They want a lot of communication with me, and they don't want to, every time I change my email address, it's like I'm lost in cyberspace. We can do much better. That's barbaric. We can have a stable endpoint that proxies for us, so that when we change our identities, it knows how to come back to me, and all I do is just change, where my email address is a clear button once, and then everybody that gives me notices is automatically updated. Address change in one click, like billions of dollars of problems and mishigas and fraud. So I think the value of cost reduction, new business models, better personalization, and an entry point for personal data legitimately to be part of big data, so we can harvest that value, is possible with this type of registry. And we hope it fits hand in glove as a capability set with the intention and the methods for consent receipts and for open notice. And one of our hopes for this hackathon in July is to do a deeper scrub and then to conform. and to harmonize with the other efforts.
Okay,
So that concludes my remarks, and I hand it to some final observations to Professor Askin.
Well, I got a couple questions. So my first question is, if this is not legally mandated, how does this become universal or broadly adopted? Is there a technical approach that allows for adoption?
So, with the indulgence of the chair, I would like to have that question posed through Mark Lazar, and perhaps it can be an entryway into discussion or other segues rather than me droning on about my homespun ideas about the future.
Yeah, thanks, Daza. That was a great introduction. And to, I guess, address your question about, what would make this required and why would this actually happen. We're estimating that 90% plus of consents that have been given are no longer legally compliant, or were never legally compliant to begin with. And to call that consent online informed is a bit of a farce, which is something we talked about earlier today, because a lot of people don't actually ever read privacy policies when they give consent and the like. So we're talking about one of the projects in the July Hackathon is to look at the status of consent by asking a company what's the status of the consent, and if it's not legal, to either provide a new consent, withdraw consent, or even provide a personal cloud where we could have our own profile. And that's by using the legal processes set out in every jurisdiction for access and rectification to personal data provided when we engage with organizations. So there is a legal requirement for consent to be valid, but no really way to update that.
That's great. That assumes that there are going to be a few courageous governments out there willing to actually enforce the law. Right?
Governments can be convinced of things.
Yes.
Until that time comes, would it make sense if the near-term approach was some sort of certification mark, good housekeeping seal of approval that says this site is open notice or clear button compliant? Is that the short term?
I'm leery of those kind of those programs ever since I read Edelman's work years ago about how sites that were trustee certified were statistically more likely to contain malware. Unless there's a significant audit and validation, which is expensive, any kind of trust seal is open to that kind of abuse. I think the way in is less that kind of top down, but more building an infrastructure where organizations have the opportunity to actually compete on this, and to provide them alternate revenue models other than the revenue model that the ad financed web now is the unitary way by which most websites are making money.
Yeah.
If users have an opportunity to both know what's going on, have some control over it, and that's part of an infrastructure whereby vendors can say, well, we can do this and now get lock-on from the user, get better loyalty. It seems to me that you provide alternate paths to revenue and alternate paths to success for vendors.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks, John, for that. I'm just going to. There's a couple of new people that joined the call. We've got Phil Booth, who's dealing with the CARE debacle in the UK, and Ruben Bind, who's the PhD researcher at Southampton University.
Hi all.
Before we give you a little introduction, we did give an update on what we're working on an open notice, which is a consent receipt, which is a artifact that people would get once they provide a consent online with the information required to withdraw or use data controls or to to engage with an organization. And we were talking about how we could work with the Clear Button project at MIT and collaborate on perhaps creating a central notice registry where a Clear Button could exist, which is very exciting. Anyways, Phil, would you like to give a little intro to yourself?
Sure, my name's Phil Booth. I currently coordinate a campaign called Med Confidential in the UK. As Mark said, we're trying to tackle consent, safety and transparency in the NHS and wider care system with regard to patient information. I previously coordinated Notice ID, which took out the Home Office, UK Home Office's National Identity Scheme, ID cards, and a number of other sort of database state initiatives. I do declare an interest. I advise a number of players in this space, roughly speaking, certainly sort of personal data store or personal information broker type organizations. So I have some awareness, some understanding, and I'm sort of looking at things like federated consent as well. Okay.
Thanks, Phil. Ruben?
Hi. I'm a second year PhD student at the University of Southampton. My research is around transparency over how data is used. So the first bit of research I did was looking at an existing database of about 350,000 organizations, which says, in broad terms, what they do with data, what kinds of data they collect, who they share it with. And so it's a kind of interesting starting point for some of the systems we're talking about, but there's a long way to go to get something that's actually universal, that works for people's purposes, and can be used kind of contextually, and then controls to be applied to it. So it's kind of looking at an existing source of data that is good food for thought. But I'm very much interested in the new kinds of initiatives that are working in this space to make something like that more kind of usable in practice.
Thanks, Ruben. Well, great. So what we were able to work on a little bit earlier today, John Mary and I, we're working on the idea of an open notice registry, which, if you could imagine, an organization gives a receipt, and let's put this up. An organization would give a receipt to an individual when they consent to sharing personal data, and the individual would get a copy of that receipt, and we're put in a local shoebox, and the organization would get a copy of that receipt, and then part of that information, like the policies that they're used, third parties that the information is shared with by the organization, would be sent to an open notice registry. And an individual could at a later date go to the registry and use third-party services like a Clear Button, where they could announce that they would like to collect their data from these other third parties. So we're starting to work on this as a summer hackathon project, and we're looking at, in July 12th and 13th, having a hackathon in California, Berlin, and Tel Aviv. And one of the projects we're looking at working on would be this registry, and we're thinking a use case would be withdrawing consent to share medical data. Because this is the sort of solution, I think we had a conference earlier this week where Phil and I were able to meet with also with Ruben, and we were talking about one of the really wicked problems here is the lack of infrastructure for people to get their data or to withdraw consent, and we're looking at how we might test developing some of this infrastructure. So this is what we came up with so far today, as far as a summer collaboration project with MIT. Daz, are you there, or are you gone?
Yeah, we're very much here. We're here. We're present.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so we came up with this diagram today, and as you can of an open notice registry, and maybe the architecture of a collaboration between
I
all
don't
of.
see anything.
Oh, it's on John's window. You click John's thumbnail.
Got it.
Is Mary coming back?
Yes, Mary is.
Mary's there.
I don't see her.
I'm here.
Oh,
I
you
can
are?
see
Hi,
you
Mary.
guys.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't want to ruin
It's
the show,
okay.
but I just can't let another moment go by without saying, so great to see you.
Oh,
wait to
thank you.
collaborate.
You too.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I don't know if Mary or John, if you introduce yourself on this call. Do you want to go ahead, Mary? Do you want to give a quick introduction?
Well, I'm working with Mark, obviously, on the open notice and consent receipt problem, and with the group, the Open Notice Initiative, and I more generally work on privacy and personal data control technology, consulting, and also with specific groups like the IDESG, which is the working group for the NSTIC project, and NSTIC is the National Identity Standards piece. So, you know, I'm kind of coming at this from a few different perspectives. And I'm in on West Coast time, so it's a little bit early for me.
Yeah, thanks for coming involved. John, do you want to give a little intro?
Sure. I'm a independent privacy consultant here in Toronto. My background is formerly as director of privacy, and then and working with Ann Kavukian as a policy advisor, with regulatory. But originally, I'm a geek and IT and operations guy, so I come at this from that perspective. Most of my practice these days is working with health-related organizations, government-related organizations here in Ontario, making sure that they're compliant. But my involvement in this project sort of goes back to more of my days as a regulator and trying to bring some transparency and to the process of personal data acquisition and use, so that we can realize the idea of people getting some kind of granular control. And a pet peeve, despite the fact that I've written many privacy policies that aren't actually privacy policies for clients or data usage policies, is to make it transparent and to give users more options and the ability to exert control. And if you go back to Doc's clue train, think of consent and notice as a dialogue and not a monologue.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming to this session. Really, this session is about creating a collaboration and working on a project to show off all of this great work and all these great ideas. So I think one of the plans, the things we're working on is to, on the Open Notice website, to create a form that gives out a consent receipt, and also to create a form that people can send, well, it's a consent receipt request form that people can send to organizations to control their data. Ruben led a project at the February Hackathon called a consent receipt request project with a bunch of other great people in London, which actually won the hackathon in London. And we're looking to put that into a web page so that people can to send an organization a request to withdraw the consent, basically. And we're looking, perhaps working with Phil, to make a very UK medical specific version of that consent receipt request form. Phil's knows the exact codes the NHS doctors should have to withdraw consent.
More importantly, we have relationships with the GP IT suppliers who implement those codes. So it's a fairly mishmash sort of IT ecosystem around GP health records, or GP held medical records. But if we could at least pick off one supplier who might look at implementing a consent notice for the current project program scheme that is problematic, that's one called care.data. One thing we have already is demand from patients who want to know that they have been correctly opted out of this system. We've had many hundreds of thousands of them do that, possibly over 1 million or so earlier this year. It's every likelihood that many more, will do so as the project moves forward. And we're, as I say, one of the IT suppliers and a number of GPs to be willing to pilot, at the very least, and possibly have available something like a consent notice. Then we have a go at trying to get them to do it.
Yes, that's great. So it seems like we got a very real-world use case and with a high demand here in the UK that we could do some alpha testing with. And I think to make this a valuable project, rather than just have one form go off into cyberspace with a record of that request, there would be a registry that would collect the responses to that form, as well as an indication of whether or not the request has been answered. So at its most basic function, it gives us an opportunity perhaps to test building this, and then developing the Clear Button project with DASA. So I don't know, does anyone have any thoughts on whether or not do you think that, well, first of all, do you think this is a good project? Ruben, is this something you could see yourself working on with me?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, is the idea to get kind of some work done on it in Berlin during the hackathon, or are we going to be kind of, is it more of a long-term thing?
Well, I was thinking what we might do is set up a session once a week between here and Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
To set this up and to take the consent receipt work that we've done, build a web page, and then to build from that about the scope out with Phil and a more specific consent request that might work.
Yep.
In line with a Clear Button registry or an Open Notice registry, and sort of connecting the two functions together.
Yeah. Yep.
So, one, I guess we would perhaps pick a time, probably between 5 and 7 p.m. Like Wednesdays for the next 3 weeks, and for an hour, just take the existing work and make a web page for this, and then have a place where all these receipts are sent. It's probably just going to be a database at the moment for the first version that we'll call the future Open Notice Registry, and with the intent of making this an open source registry, and making our work open source so that other projects and communities could use it.
Mm-hmm.
But also access. I mean, I understand the consent notice, and I understand needing somewhere that certainly a person without a secure store would need to store their consent notices. But is this anything more than the dashboard that we spoke about earlier this week, or it sounds like a consent registry is a somewhat more heavily duty architected thing and merely a dashboard, yeah?
Yeah, well, I think, so the individual would have a consent dashboard.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a notice registry. So a notice registry is mainly information about the GP in this context, and the third parties related to the GP, like the government,
mm-hmm.
And information about how many consents have been withdrawn, like on aggregate. It would not contain personal information or information about the specific consent. We are talking in this diagram about storing a consent request ID number, so the individual could then come and check and see if the consent has been withdrawn, or also enable consent so they can provide consent. Again, so some very limited functionality there. But
Right.
the open notice registry is for legally required notices for consent. And in the future, this could scale up and scope out to anything from CCTV to sensors in physical spaces to whatever we would like a notice for a consent for personal data usage.
Well, I say, our interest, obviously, our primary concern as patient and medical confidentiality advocates is to get something that demonstrates in the real world how this could work. To be honest, I'm less concerned about how you architect the rest of the system, although, of course, if it introduces things where the patients themselves may have questions or concerns, really, the patient, the question we're getting asked is, I have opted out, but I've had to use a piece of paper to do that, a form, literally, that we or maybe even their GP practice has provided them with. And yet, that is flipping some switches on an IT system that I can't see, to which I don't have access. I want to know definitively that those switches that I've asked my GP to flip, which relate to the removal or extraction of my medical data from the GP record, have correctly been put in place. That's all the patient wants to know. If we can prove that, demonstrate that, give patients something, whether it's, as I say, view on a dashboard or even just a notification on a screen or whatever it is, we would be a significant step forward. Now, I don't know whether that fits, where that fits within your overall program or sort of broader use cases, but that's the bit that we would certainly be very, very interested in doing. There would be a lot of work to do just around that. There would be a massive amount of work to do just around that. Not programming work, not technical work, just a lot of negotiating, finding people who would go along with it. This is not rock up the better mousetrap and people will use it.
Yeah, no, it does seem to be quite involved. So the process is the individual's got to go to their doctor.
Yep.
And then they could at that point get some sort of receipt from the doctor, but that's probably not going to happen without some major mountain.
That isn't happening. That's the point. Nothing is happening. They're getting nothing back. They have to go to their doctor again or hassle their surgery to get any sort of indication of whether the request that they have made has been implemented. It's crazy, isn't it?
It sounds like so I think it's between the doctor and the third parties. So the doctor would then, it'd be like some indication that an individual could go to a third party, like a registry, and see if a consent has been withdrawn with some ID number.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, I'll take a specific case, though I don't know it's entirely accurate. Say that the GP's IT system provider was EMIS, and that practice has decided to adopt the web version of EMIS, which allows patients to log in. Yeah, that would then provide some sort of portal for the patient to look at information out of the EMIS system. But of course, the consents will not be there. Yeah, it will be things like maybe your medications or your appointments or something like that. Yeah, consent just isn't represented to the patient, and it's poorly represented within the ecosystem of GP IT suppliers. Yeah? Were there to be a federated consent, something which, like I say, you guys provided the architecture, the mechanisms for, then it might be relatively straightforward to say, well, look, here are the 4 main suppliers in England at least, and here is one that has actually implemented this open architecture, open source thing, what have you, and it's working for patients. Because of the current political climate around this, I can't see that it wouldn't be seen as a positive intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? But equally, I can't say that there won't be all sorts of other politics around it. But it seems to me it's a good, it's as good a use case as you're likely to find sitting there waiting to be done, without you actually making one up.
Okay, well, I definitely think that we should document this use case and put it in line, and the minimum address it within the scope of our project, as a real-world scenario where we would try to provide a problem with the Open Notice Clear Button project, because this is something Open Notice directs, and this is something that Clear Button is going to be directed at as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a interesting use case, Phil. I work in this space as well, and I should probably on the other side. And the most consent is either implicit or explicit, but it's done in person in the actual medical interaction between doctor, consumer, and provider.
Yep.
And then it flows through to the portal, a personal health record or a portal that you say. So this would be an interesting add-on, because the original concept of the consent receipt is provides the possibility of a pre-transaction notice, so that it's initially a web transaction between an individual and a website provider as to where the consent is obtained. And what you've described, I understand it, I think, reasonably well, is where the consent is obtained not in cyberspace but in meat space, and then how do we translate what sits in the electronic health record or the electronic medical record into the patient portal. So
right.
That's,
sorry, I should say we were bound by the current scenario. So paper was all we had. We did actually erect an online. Sorry, I should be very clear. We are talking about dissent here, very specifically. People wishing to exclude themselves from something. So it is not a positive consent being given in the context of a medical consultation. It is a decision being made by a patient on the basis of information which they have, which means they wish to exclude themselves from something, themselves and their dependents, which is why it's a fairly odd one. Now, we did scale up to web sort of scale, and we did very, very briefly, in fact, it was probably part of them taking the policy decision to halt the program. We got an online opt-out form up and running. Now, it would be far better this time around, now that we're talking with them, as you say, to think about how this all actually fits in the more general case than what was a bit of a political scramble.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, and it differs from what we're doing currently with the consent receipt digitally, in that it seems that this consent is verbally given. So a doctor will ask, do you want to opt out of sharing your...
Oh, no, sorry, the doctor will not ask. We had to try to prevent people from... Let me start again. In order to reduce the number of people who opted out of having all of their information taken and sold, the body that tried to do this system tuned the consent-dissent process to get the minimum number of opt-outs. So they were encouraging people to have to go to their doctor and go through a meat space transaction and waste lots of doctors' time. We combated that by providing them with a paper form they could download off the web, and then, as I say, got a little bit further. Many, many people used that form. So many, in fact, that the government had to put out its own form to, if you like, combat our form. And many, many, many doctors used this form. Yeah. The feedback that we got was that when this form was either physically walked into the surgery or posted to them, that was where it, basically started to sort of break down, because the doctors weren't ready, the systems weren't ready, no one was ready to tell the patient that it's okay, we've opted you out. And that's what we were trying, that's what people wanted to know. They wanted to know that their medical record was safe, their medical information was safe, held securely on the GP system, but not to be extracted into these other systems which people have very rational, realistic, reasonable fears about.
Okay, so it sounds like the doctor needs, or the system needs to provide a consent receipt or a dissent receipt saying you've been opted out.
Yeah.
So essentially, I'm wondering if there's a third party, or a secondary source where you works in conjunction with that, or if there's just a digital form that can be sent or clicked on to provide that sort of dissent receipt to the individual.
Well, the only third parties involved, apart from the GP and the patient, would be the GP's IT supplier in this instance.
All right, so that's a very good use case. So I think what we do is definitely we should get this down, and make sure it works within the scope of what we're doing. But if not, get it down in a way that we can move it forward a bit, and have a bit more of a solution-oriented discussion on how to solve this on a scale.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. I've noticed that we've just come pretty much to the end of our time for this session. So before we go, I definitely do want to suggest maybe having a call on this collaboration for the next 3 Wednesdays, the next 3 weeks on perhaps Wednesday. I will send out an email and maybe with a little doodle for people who can and can make 1 or 2 of those times, and we can maybe organize the schedule. And then we will produce a hack project for July 12th and 13th Hackathon, which I invite everyone. We're hopefully going to be using this legalhackathon.org virtual venue that Daz has been developing. So no matter where you are, you could get involved, and we can have some sessions on this. So that's great. Thanks everybody for coming. And I just before we go, Daz, did you have anything to say? Did you hear how we thought we could work with ClearButton? Did I put you on the spot? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm sorry about that. And could you please repeat the question, because everyone's so excited, we're all a tizzy, and I could barely hear what you were saying.
I was just wondering.
Was it like closing questions, or I just couldn't make it out? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Closing questions, and any thoughts on collaborating with Open Notice with the ClearButton project?
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, I thought I just want to make sure I was responding well. A couple. I think the main thing here is we're trying to understand as this 4-day hackathon winds down, next steps, and how to meaningfully have some cadence of continued collaboration building up to the July hackathon, and we want to get a better read of what Mary has in mind and what you have in mind and what's happening in Tel Aviv. We have no visible. We know the word Tel Aviv. Never been on a call, not sure. So we want more. We want to sort of pre-produce some of this a little bit, and then maybe set up a couple interim things, like maybe set up a couple interim dialogues or something that people can participate in, and of course work sessions. So that's one question and some sort of a stream of discussion here. The other one is relates to my favorite topic, a roadmap. Love me a roadmap, and so we did a successful roadmap. I think successful starting roadmap for the Democracy 2.0 platform that Councilman Kalos and Supervisor Farrell, laid down the challenge for yesterday at the hackathon, to have an open source legislative drafting, like legal publishing, participation kind of platform that's open source to help them have more of an alternative across cities where they're kind of building duplicative things and are locked in vendor chaos right now. So they want sort of a reusable architecture that's done well. And 1 year from from now is when they want the presentation of that. That was a great challenge, and the first thing we did was start a notional roadmap, basically, not hardcore, but how many components are there, what sorts of services, basic stuff, and a sense of time. I'd love to see that type of thing here. I know you said you had a start on it, and I apologize, but so there's people in and out here, so I didn't hear all of your remarks, and if you just said it, I apologize, but we know we want to work on the roadmap, we want to iterate the roadmap, like we prioritize the roadmap very much. I mean, it's not the same as doing the work, but it's something that I know we can do that's helpful here, and we can contribute to. And then I guess the other part is, I'll just put it on the hit list, or your coordination of finishing implementing the integration of our GitHub repositories, so that we cross-reference one another and that we are more meaningfully in connection without having to do like the ridiculous like hierarchical or other like overkill sort of stuff would be great. And I think we've done all the thinking necessary to do that through. We just have to do the doing of it now. But it doesn't go without saying. And then the final thing on my mind is I would like I really want to like have like a however long it takes with you and Mary and me minimally, but others as well on our team here that care about ClearButton, maybe others on yours, to just do like a point by point cross reference of ClearButton, open notice, and consent receipt, and then do like a gap analysis and like a kind of like alignment and kind of harmonization kind of review to see how much of this is identical. Just more the better as far as I'm concerned. How much of it is a little different? How much of it is conflicting or different assumptions? Well, I want to surface that so we can have reasonable conversations. And then I just want to tell you in advance, like I hereby surrender. I don't care to fight for this or that thing, but I do care that we have a harmonized, rational approach that has a chance of success. And I don't feel we have that now because I don't even know how our things are exactly different. So I want to do that due diligence. So those are my those are the key priorities on the top of my head. I'm sorry, we need to have a party too, because like all these people are working so hard, and like we have our head relationships with the spouses and things. Like I think we deserve some fun. So I want to just put the idea, like when you go to conferences, they do something that's fun. Well, we can't really go out to drinks, and we can't do that, but maybe we could have some music or tell a joke or do something that's fun. I know people are into making stuff, like show us your 3D printed, like crazy artifacts or something. I want to have a party. So I'm hereby moved that we have a party at some point, and that we've failed our leadership role if it doesn't happen. And that concludes my recommendations.
That's great. Well, thanks, Daza. I think you talked a lot about what we wish to get to today, which is really good. I think I propose that we meet next Wednesday around, I guess, noon your time, 5 o'clock UK time, and 9 in San Francisco, to talk about the roadmap and the use case for this. Actually, we can make an agenda of priorities.
18th.
Yeah.
I can do 10 a.m. Pacific. I can't do 9 a.m. I have a meeting.
All right.
If you guys would be willing to do it an hour later, I could totally join you.
Perfect.
When is that? Sorry.
So that would be the 18th of June at 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. Boston time, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Okay. Your time is reserved. We won't even charge you. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I would love to do that. Just to double check, though, are we talking about like a scrub of like the 3 projects, or why are we having the meeting?
All right. So I think depending on the availability of Phil and perhaps Ruben, I think we definitely want to talk about the ClearButton open notice and the roadmap. So we kind of need that in order to do other things. Definitely, and then we're talking about a use case for the consent receipt as well, which the reason why Phil's here is because the use case he brings is something very close to ClearButton and very close to the consent receipt. So we're looking at that to see if either the consent receipt or the ClearButton or both can actually address the problems with care data in the UK, which has a very present and real need with millions of people needing and wanting to use it right now. So.
May I ask a question quickly? Like, Mary and Mark, do you hear anything in conflict, or if you know that there's something that we have to highlight to harmonize these things or align them, can we get an email or something on that in advance? Because
sure. Well,
maybe this is going to be a real quick meeting, or maybe it'll be a long one. But I'd like, the more we can prep it in advance, the better, in my mind.
Yeah, I think the big difference between ClearButton and Open Notice is that we're not looking for a centralized repository of people's data or people's identities.
Yep.
We're looking for a central notice repository of the organizations.
Yep.
Where then something like ClearButton would sit on top of that. They'll, on the behest of the individual, send to those organizations requests to either control data or access it.
Yep.
So the ClearButton seems like a proxy or an intermediary in between. The two. So so I'm just seeing a notice from. Yeah. So Mary's saying she needs to go through an architecture review to answer your question.
Good. That's what I want. Are we doing that? So will you do a review before Wednesday, or are we going to sort of just say on Wednesday we'll do the review?
I'd be happy to do that on Wednesday. I could do it before, but you know, basically, I think it would be good to make a meeting and kind of do that architectural and feature review that you're talking about, Daza, and then we could answer those questions, I think, really definitively. But we kind of need to go through that on a, you know, piece-by-piece basis. So.
Great. I mean, and it's not like we have some kind of like amazing, like mature architecture. Like this is an idea for a system that doesn't yet exist. So architecture, shall we say, somewhat malleable, and it's highly receptive to good ideas. So I mean, if we actually did jointly do the architectural review, I have a feeling there'd be like this inexorable magnetic like convergence. You know, just saying.
That's fine. That's good. I like it.
That is good.
Okay.
I nominate that we do it together. Then also, it's easier to like.
Yeah.
Feel like, when is it really a good time to do a big architectural review before a call on Wednesday? Really? Like, I think it's more realistic. We'll just do it on Wednesday. And
let's do it Wednesday.
Okay,
that
so
sounds good.
We started a bit of an architecture today that might work out for that, so we can maybe John can send that around. And as far as working on then the medical use case for care data, perhaps we can do that on the 25th of June, a week later. Does that sound?
I can't make the 25th.
You can't.
I can't. I already have a meeting all that evening.
Okay. Well, how about I can actually meet with you separately on the 18th, and we could document that. Maybe Ruben, are you up for helping with that, documenting with me
Sure. What day would that be?
And then I could hand it over to the or apply it to the architecture review, and to see. Pardon?
Was that the 18th? Or the...
Yes, that would be Wednesday the 18th. So it would be 5 p.m. UK time.
5 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Excellent. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Real quick, final second thing. There's an invitation here we just worked out, which is that there's Big Data Privacy Book launch at NYU or under NYU's auspices Monday. Okay, and so I'm going down there for that as one of the co-authors in a research group, and so we'll be on a panel. And we got permission to have the next segment of the Legal Hackathon Hangout series actually at that event during the panel that I'm going to be on. And so so Jonathan Askin will be there in person, and Arik, one of our researchers, will as well. What we're thinking is, if you were into it, Mark, or through this group, it might be a good time to vector in what's happening in London with what's hackening there in New York and the big data and privacy dialogue. So that, for example, Jonathan is like the host there. I'll be locked on a panel. I won't be able to do anything, but he'll have freedom in the audience, and so he could take your questions and pose them, and we could do some interviews with people and do, not a lot, but we can do a little bit of community building and like meaningful cross-site presence and integration, and he's willing to do that. So just throwing out there, if you're around and interested, it's Monday between like 10 and somewhere between like 10 and 12 p.m. Eastern time, and it's an offer. I think it's mostly cool just because to demonstrate and get good at the capability, not because it's like, oh my God, you'll never have another chance to, like be involved in a panel.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just want to throw out there's an offer and an invitation.
That'd be great. We can post this hackathon. We can talk about the medical use case and the architecture and your button. So great. Yeah.
Okay. You said it'd be great.
Okay.
Nodder will follow up then with you and others to get it on your calendar.
Okay. Cool. And
thank you.
That's great. And hopefully I see John next week in London. John Askin, that is.
Hi, Mark.
Hi.
Yes, I sent you a bunch of events that I think, some of which you'll find interesting. I assume you're doing a lot of the, the Technology Week events?
Yeah, I'm not, but I will be
okay.
now. Yeah.
I'll be there at the tail end of Technology Week, so I'll miss that, except what we're doing at Queen Mary.
Okay.
On the 19th.
Great. Well, hopefully I meet you in person next week then.
Excellent.
Great. And does anyone have any more closing remarks? I think, John Wunderlich, did you have something you were going to say?
No, I'm all good.
You're all good? Okay.
I'm trying to figure out my timing.
Ruben, are you good?
You were talking about the Technology Week events.
Yeah.
There's something on Thursday, am I right? The IEC Data Principles consultation?
Yes.
Yeah, I should be there. That's in the morning, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think Jonathan Askin's going to be there as well.
Cool. That'd be great to meet up.
All right, great. And Phil, if you're around, that'd be great to see you too. I guess you're out of town then. But,
pretty busy at the moment. Pretty busy at the moment.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate your attendance, and look forward to making shit happen.
All right. Cheers.
Cool.
Yeah, bye.
Bye, everyone.